What's going on, guys? Today, one thing I've noticed with this is I always start with, what's going on, guys? And then I always cut it out, though. I always cut it out of the video because I hate it. So what can I say that's not that? Intake manifold. Manifold of intake. Manifold intake. Intaking the manifold. Today what I'm doing, I'm replacing my factory 302 intake for an Edelbrock. People, they stare at me as they drive by and look at me like I'm weird. So why am I putting a new intake on my 302? Well, because my goal is to upgrade to the FiTech EFI system. The FiTech system actually needs a 2-barrel or a 4-barrel intake manifold. So that's why I am upgrading. So step one, go ahead and drain all the coolant out of your system. You want to make sure that there's not a lot of coolant in there, because if you understand engines, you know that the coolant runs through parts of the intake manifold and through the block of the engine to cool it down when it gets heated up. So you want to make sure, first step, drain all the coolant. Then step two is removing the air cleaner, air filter, air cleaner assembly, air filter assembly. Because I've been doing the painless wiring harness install, I already have removed this as I've been working in the engine a bunch, so I don't have that on there. Next, what you want to do is remove the upper radiator hose. All the coolant's drained out of there, so this should be pretty easy, but just go ahead and remove that. Then remove the hose that goes to your heater and the water bypass hose. All right, so the next thing that you want to do is you want to mark where your number one spark plug goes. Now, on a 302 engine, the number one cylinder is on the passenger side all the way at the front. And so you want to mark where that spark plug wire goes on the distributor cap, because later what you're going to do is kind of mark that spot and find top dead center. Once you have that marked, then you can pull all the wires off of the distributor cap and set them to the side. You can pull them all out completely if you want to. I left them just kind of plugged in, but just moved to the side. So now what you want to do is you want to actually turn the engine over to where the rotor blade is at the number one position where you just marked it on your distributor cap. Then try to remove the coil. But you can't, because there's part of it that's under the valve cover. So at this point, remove your valve covers and then remove the coil. So at different points of this, I had my valve covers on and then I would pull them off. For the most part, I kept my valve covers on just to keep debris from going in there if I was doing something. But there are a couple times where I would pull it off to look at something, or when I was doing something else, I'd pull them off. So you'll see them kind of pop on and off. Then you want to remove the fuel inlet line from the carburetor. Then remove the distributor, vacuum, and any wires running to the distributor. Then mark your distributor placement on the distributor and on the block. Then remove the distributor hold down bolt and carefully slide the distributor out. Be careful to make sure that the distributor to oil shaft stays in the engine connected to the oil pump. When I pulled mine out, I have no idea if this stayed in the engine or if it came out. So we'll find out when I reinstall it. Then remove the spring holder for the carburetor throttle, the temperature sensor wire, then the throttle cable or the linkage at the carburetor, and then the kickdown cable if you have an automatic transmission like I do. Then remove the carburetor by loosening the 4 bolts holding it to the intake manifold. All right, at this point, you are basically ready to remove your intake manifold. So just go ahead and loosen all the bolts on your intake manifold, and it should pull right off. Mine actually came up pretty easily. I was kind of shocked, but I was really trying hard not to. There's a bunch of like dirt and crap on top of the intake manifold that I was trying not to just dump into the engine valley. Really looking at it versus the Edelbrock intake manifold, there's not a ton that is different about it. If you take off the carburetor spacer that mine has, it's a good bit shorter than the Edelbrock is, but other than that, there's not a ton of difference. The Edelbrock is way lighter, which is good. Less weight on the engine is always a good thing. Next, what you want to do is you want to clean the heads where the old manifold was. I stuffed paper towels down in the holes and put a piece of cardboard down in the valley just to make sure that no debris would get down in there. Then what I did was I took a razor and removed the old RTV and gasket. Then I ran a 3M sanding disc along the heads to clean it up and make them smooth. Now let me say this again. Be careful not to allow any debris in those ports, in those holes, because you do not want anything going down in there. I had the paper towels in there, but then I also kept vacuuming as I went and just sucking up at all the debris and all the junk that I was scraping off those ports, and really tried to make sure that I kept that whole area clean. All right, so the next thing I did was I just test fitted the Felpro gasket, made sure that it was gonna fit right, it didn't cover any of the ports, and then I test fitted the intake manifold. And what I was just trying to do there was I was just making sure that everything laid flat and that it looked like it was gonna fit nicely. And remember, the back ports on the Ford 302 heads, those get blocked from the factory. So it's not an accident if you realize, oh crap, my Edelbrock intake doesn't have the back ports. It was like that from the factory. They aren't needed and thus can be blocked. Then what you want to do is apply a light bead of RTV around the front and the back water ports and then install your gasket. So just a note, I don't recommend applying the RTV to any of the other ports, just the water ports. You don't want to get this stuff in the ports. You don't want it to suck into the engine. It could really mess some stuff up. Then apply a thick bead of the RTV to the front there and the back. And you want this to be like 1/4 of an inch thick. You want this thing thick. Don't use those extra little Felpro gaskets that come with it. Those things don't work. What you want to do here is apply a thick bead of RTV to the front and the back. Then apply another bead of RTV around the water ports on the gasket. So then let the RTV sit for a few minutes and then finally drop the new manifold in place. Really try to get it right the first time. Don't move it around. Don't slide it. Really try to drop it right on at the right spot. Then what you want to do is hand tighten the bolts. I think you're supposed to go in order with these, but I just put them on. But then you actually tighten the bolts, and how you tighten them is in this order. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So when you tighten the bolts, you want to tighten them down in at least 2 steps. The max foot-pounds that you're tightening these things down is only about 20 pounds. And so they're pretty easy to tighten down, but you just want to make sure that you're tightening them down evenly and that you're not over tightening them. You do not want to over tighten these bolts. Then make sure to let everything sit. Then install everything you took off and start her up and go for a drive. But for me, I'm going to stop right here because my next step is installing the FiTech EFI system, like I said. So yeah, that's it for today. Thank you for sticking around. Thanks for watching. And as always, leave a comment below if you have any questions. Thanks, guys.